Part 1. I still remember the exact sound the envelope made when it slid under my bedroom door, soft, deliberate, like someone trying to be polite while doing something deeply wrong. I thought it was just another utility bill or one of my mom's handwritten grocery lists. Instead, it was a printed notice. A rent notice. My name typed at the top like I was some stranger renting a room in my own life. I stared at the number for a long time, convinced I was misunderstanding something. But the words didn't change. Rent due, $1,200. My hands actually trembled as I read the final line, late payments will result in penalties. That's when I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt unreal. This was my house. I had bought it 3 years ago after working myself to exhaustion just to escape the cramped apartment we used to share. When I walked into the kitchen, my parents were sitting like nothing had happened. My dad was reading the newspaper, my mom scrolling through her phone. I placed the notice on the table between them. "What is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mom didn't even look surprised. She just leaned back and said, "It's rent. You're living here, aren't you?" The casual way she said it made something twist inside me. I reminded them, carefully at first, that I owned the house. My name was on every document. I paid the mortgage, the taxes, the repairs. But my dad finally folded his paper and gave me a look I hadn't seen since I was a kid being scolded. "Ownership doesn't mean you don't contribute," he said. "We've spent our whole lives raising you. It's time you give back." That sentence stayed with me long after the conversation ended. Not because I didn't want to help them, I had been helping them for years. I paid most of the bills already. I covered groceries, insurance, even my dad's medical expenses. But this wasn't about support. This felt like control, like they were rewriting reality and expecting me to accept it. Still, I paid the first month. Then the second. Each time, I told myself it was temporary. That maybe they were struggling more than they admitted. That maybe this was their awkward way of asking for help. But things didn't get better. They got worse. Soon, the rules started appearing. Notes on the fridge about shared space responsibilities. Complaints about my schedule. Comments about how I used too much electricity. It was like I had become a tenant in a place I had built from nothing. One night, I came home late from work to find my mom sitting in the living room, waiting. She pointed to the clock and said, "Tenants should respect house hours." That was the moment something inside me cracked. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just went to my room, closed the door, and stared at the walls that I had painted myself. For the first time, it didn't feel like home. I started digging through my documents the next day. Not because I doubted ownership, but because I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. Every paper confirmed it. My name, my signature, my responsibility. And then I found something else. A folder I didn't remember creating. Inside were copies of bills I had paid over the past 2 years. Every expense, every transfer, it was all there, like a quiet record of everything I had already given. That's when the realization hit me, this wasn't about helping them survive. They were comfortable, too comfortable. My money had made sure of that. The next rent notice came with an added, late fee, even though I had paid on time. That's when I stopped. I didn't hand over the money. I didn't argue either. I just placed the notice back on the kitchen table and walked away. My mom confronted me later that evening, her voice sharp and accusing. "If you don't pay, there will be consequences," she warned. I looked at her for a long moment, searching for something, guilt, hesitation, anything that resembled the mother I thought I knew. But there was nothing, just expectation. That night, I made a decision I should have made months earlier. I called a lawyer. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't give them a warning. For once, I chose silence over confrontation. The consultation confirmed everything I already knew, but hearing it from someone else made it real. Legally, they had no right to charge me rent. No authority to impose rules. And if I wanted, I could remove them from the property entirely. The word the lawyer used echoed in my mind long after the call ended. Eviction. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was unsure, but because I was finally certain. Part 2. The papers felt heavier than they should have when I held them in my hands. Maybe because they didn't just carry legal weight, they carried years of guilt, obligation, and everything I had been taught about family. I stood outside the living room, listening to my parents talk like it was any other day. My mom laughed at something on TV. My dad complained about the news. For a moment, I almost turned around. Almost convinced myself that I was overreacting. But then I remembered the envelopes, the rules, the way they had turned my own home into something transactional. That's when I stepped in. "I need you to read this," I said, placing the documents on the table. My dad glanced at them first, his expression annoyed more than concerned. But as he read further, his face changed. My mom leaned over, her curiosity turning into confusion, then disbelief. "What is this?" she demanded. My voice didn't shake this time. "It's a notice," I said. "You have 30 days to leave." The silence that followed was louder than any argument we'd ever had. It wasn't just shock, it was the collapse of an illusion they had been living in. My mom was the first to react. "You can't do this," she said, her voice rising. "We're your parents." I nodded slowly. "And I'm your daughter. But this is my house." My dad slammed his hand on the table, anger finally replacing his usual calm authority. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I've been repaying you for years," I said quietly. "This isn't about repayment. This is about respect." The next few days were a storm of arguments, accusations, and emotional manipulation. They called relatives, trying to paint me as ungrateful. I received messages telling me to reconsider, to be the bigger person. But none of those people had lived in that house. None of them had opened those envelopes. None of them had felt what it was like to be treated like a tenant in your own space. I stopped responding. For the first time in my life, I chose boundaries over approval. What surprised me most was how quickly things changed once the reality set in. My parents stopped acting like owners. The complaints disappeared. The notes on the fridge were gone. It was like the illusion had shattered, and they didn't know how to rebuild it. But by then, it was too late. Something fundamental had broken, not just trust, but the idea of what family meant to me. On the final week, my mom tried a different approach. She knocked on my door, her voice softer than it had been in months. "We didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. I looked at her, really looked at her, searching again for sincerity. This time, I found something, but it wasn't regret. It was fear. Fear of losing comfort. Fear of change. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she acknowledge what they had done. And that told me everything I needed to know. Moving day was quiet. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no tearful reconciliations. Just boxes, footsteps, and the slow emptiness of a house reclaiming itself. My dad avoided eye contact. My mom lingered for a moment at the door, as if expecting me to stop her. I didn't. When the door finally closed behind them, the silence felt different this time. Not heavy, not tense, just peaceful. I walked through each room slowly, taking in the space. The same walls, the same furniture, but everything felt lighter, like the house could finally breathe again. I sat down in the living room, the same place where I had once been told to respect tenant rules, and let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding for months. People like to say that family is everything. That blood means unconditional loyalty. But what they don't tell you is that loyalty without respect becomes a cage. And sometimes, the hardest thing you'll ever have to do is unlock that door yourself. The last bill my parents ever gave me wasn't written on paper. It was the cost of finally choosing myself.